Shabbat Shalom and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to once again greet you and share with you some Torah thoughts on this week's parasha. Last week we were at Or Natan for the Oneg Shabbat, and a lot of people came over requesting that such videos be put out. And so it's with your help and your commitment and your dedication that we are putting out this shir, and the goal is to share three thoughts on the parasha that can be used in our daily lives, and that is very shareable. That's something that you can bring to the table and share it with the whole family and all the guests. I want to start off that this week Parshat Ki Tisa, in the first aliyah, in the first section that's read for the Kohen, towards the end, we read about Shabbat. Again and again in the Torah, Shabbat is brought down, that a person has to keep watch and guard and honor Shabbat. And this week we learn, Ki od hi beni ubenechem, because it's a sign between me and you. Hashem says it's a sign between Him and the Jewish people. There was a great man, Rabbi Yisrael Isser. He was a dry goods merchant, primarily selling fabrics, textiles. And he was a holy man, and he had a minhag that on Erev Shabbat, on Friday, he would close his business at midday, at Hatzot. One Friday it happened that one of the noblemen of Krakow came to his store maybe an hour before Hatzot. And he started shopping and looking and taking, and he started picking up a big order. A lot of stuff on the counter. He really wanted to buy a lot of things. The time was quickly approaching midday. It was quickly approaching Chatzot. And so Rabbi Yisrael Isser told the man, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave. It's becoming midday and I have to close my shop. Close your shop, he says. What do you mean? I'm a nobleman. If you close, you're going to lose a lot of money. And I'll make sure people don't come here. You're gonna lose. Don't close it. I'm willing to pay a lot here. I'm willing to make a large purchase. Rabbi Yisrael Isser said, I'm sorry. I have Shabbat to keep. I have Shabbat to prepare for. And so the nobleman left, upset. And Rabbi Yisrael Isser quickly closed his store. Didn't put anything away. Didn't put the merchandise back. And quickly went home and went back to prepare for Shabbat. And because of this, he was blessed with a son that is well known in the Torah world. Rav Moshe Israelish, the Ramah, the commentator on the Shulchan Aruch, a famous halachic authority. And all this was in zechut of him keeping the Shabbat and preparing for Shabbat. It's important for us to remember that Shabbat doesn't come in at 5:25 or 5:26 or 4:30, whatever time the Shabbat comes in on the calendar. That's the time that the women light their candles. Shabbat is coming the whole week. A person has to prepare for Shabbat the whole week, but especially on Friday. Especially on Friday is known as Erev Shabbat. It's the eve of Shabbat. A person can never walk into anything in Judaism. You can't just walk in and wing it. You can't just go into Yom Tov. You have to prepare for Yom Tov. You have to prepare for Shabbat. You have to prepare physically for Shabbat. The women are preparing, they're cleaning, they're cooking already from Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, from wherever they started. And what about us men? What about the men? We also have to prepare. We have to prepare spiritually for Shabbat. We have to prepare in the house, help out as well. We have to prepare spiritually to come with Divrei Torah to the Shabbat table. And if a person keeps Shabbat, he's keeping his deal with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Who else can you trust but HaKadosh Baruch Hu? There are many people in the world promise you all sorts of things. They tell you, I'm doing this, I'm going to do that. Help me here, help me there, and this will happen. How many times we've been burned? How many times we've seen that what they say is not true? HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, it's a sign between me and you. And we sing every Shabbat, Ki Eshmer HaShabbat, Yishmerini. Person keeps Shabbat, Hashem watches over him. What a deal. What a deal we have. Keep Shabbat, and Hashem will watch over us. Prepare for Shabbat early. You'll be blessed even more. If you take care of what's special for Hashem, Hashem will take care for you and give you what's special for you. Let's move on to another topic in this week's parasha. A topic that's probably the central theme, if not the most spoken theme, on this week's parasha, which is the Egel Hazav. Is when the Jews were waiting for Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu said, I'm going to come back in 40 days. They're waiting. They expected him at the 6th hour of the day, and Moshe Rabbeinu does not show up. Moshe Rabbeinu does not show up, and the Jews say, what are we going to do? So they quickly go ahead and make an Egel HaZahav. They make a golden calf. It wasn't their fault. The Satan showed them in Shemayim, in heaven, a whole funeral procession for Moshe Rabbeinu as he was laying in the coffin. And they quickly went and made all sorts of arrangements and started to serve a golden calf, an idol. How quickly they fell from being able to see Hashem, from hearing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to making an egel. As the pasuk says, "Saru maher min haderech asher tzivitam," as they quickly left the path which I commanded for them. What is going on? How can it happen that all of a sudden they fell so much? My Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Yisrael Reisman Shlita, brings down from Rabbi Yaakov Greenwald, who has a sefer about the way people act. And he explains the common errors of what people do and how to avoid them. And he brings down from the Egel. Do you know what the issue was here? The issue was people were in a state of confusion. What to do? Moshe Rabbeinu didn't come back. Moshe Rabbeinu is not here. What should we do? Not knowing what to do, not having a good answer, they decided to do something. They decided to do anything. And they acted out of confusion. Instead of saying, I don't know what to do, let's take a moment. Let's think about it. Maybe let's sleep on it. If they just would have waited a few more hours, Moshe Rabbeinu would come down from Shemayim. Just a few more hours. Imagine they didn't do anything. There'd be no Egel HaZahav. We wouldn't have this sin. We wouldn't have to die. We wouldn't have any of these problems. But the people acted because they didn't know what to do. Making decisions in a state of confusion is disastrous. When you don't know what to do, it's not a good idea to do anything. And this is something that's very important in life. Sometimes we have an issue, whether it be a Shalom Bayit problem, we get very upset. We're getting upset at the spouse, we're getting upset at the kids. If a person decides to act when he's angry, decides to act when he's confused, doesn't know what to do, he says things that later he'll regret, will do things that he later will regret. There is an essay that was written by a doctor, a research physician, Lewis Thomas. And he wrote an essay entitled The Secret of the Doctors. He said sometimes people come to the doctor with a problem. It's not a life-threatening problem, but it's a problem. Something's going on. So the doctor tells them, drink a lot, water, sleep better, the common things. Make sure to stay warm. And then they tell them, come back in 3 days. And Dr. Thomas says, you know why they say to come back in 3 days? Because most times, these problems resolve themselves. Sometimes if you just wait a little bit, if you just take the time to figure it out, problems will be self-resolved. Sometimes what we think is a problem is really not a problem. It just needs a little time to pass for us to understand the issue better. So it's important that before we decide to do something, make sure we have the facts in front of us. Make sure that we've thought about it. We've thought about it from all angles. And we've gone ahead and then made our decision and then acted upon it. Acting in a state of confusion is not something that we should ever do. It's the whole egel was when people didn't know what to do and decided to do something. That's not how we live a life. That's not how we live a intellectual life, a Torah life. We think about what we're doing. We analyze the situation. And we do it with a clear head, knowing what to really do. Harav Galinsky brings an interesting story that I think fits this idea. When the great Gaon, the Stipler Gaon, was conscripted into the Russian army, he was given guard duty one Friday night from midnight until the morning. And it was during the height of the cold, snowy winter. And if one stood still without moving, he could freeze to death. The guard on duty would wrap himself in a thick wool coat to keep from freezing. The guy who had guard duty before the Stipler finished his watch, took off the coat, and hung it on a branch of tree for the next guard who came on duty. And now the Stipler Gaon came and sees the coat hanging from the tree. The halacha is clear. You cannot make use of a tree on Shabbat. But it's pikuach nefesh. It's a life-threatening situation. Certainly this applied to a rabbinical decree, such as the prohibition of using a tree on Shabbat. True, the Stipler Gaon said to himself, but I could wait another 5 minutes. I can make it for 5 minutes. He stood there for 5 minutes without a coat. And after 5 minutes decided he could do another 5 minutes. And then another, and another, until morning came. And his guard duty was up. Just take the time. Just push it off a little bit. In fact, we're told that's how you deal with the Yetzer Hara. With the Yetzer Hara, you always push him off. Don't tell him I'm not going to do it. Tell the Yetzer Hara, I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to do it later. Keep pushing it off. If only they had waited. Adam and Chava ate from the Etz Hadat. She was told not to eat. Do you know that we were told that if you would have waited to the end of the day, that tree would have become permitted for them to eat as well? A person has to just wait. Just wait a little bit. Don't get too excited. Don't do things quickly. Take your time to think it through and get it done. Let's move on to our third offering for this week. And this one comes from Rav Schwab. Moshe Rabbeinu comes down and he sees Klal Yisrael and he sees what they're doing. And he gathers around and he says, Vayamon Moshe b'shar machaneh v'yomer mi laHashem elai. Who is for Hashem? Come to me. Vayasfu elav kol b'nei Levi. And all the children of Levi came to Moshe. Rav Schwab says that when he was a young man learning in the Mir Yeshiva, he was returning home from Germany to the Mir Yeshiva. He stopped in Radin to meet the Chafetz Chaim. It was the Friday before Shabbat Vayakel Pikudei in 1930. That Friday afternoon, the Rav Schwab says, I met the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim asked me, are you a Kohen? I told him no. He said, are you a Levi? I said no. He said, oh, what a pity. Mashiach is coming, the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt. And everyone will want to come to the Beit HaMikdash. But there's a lot of Kedusha, a lot of holiness in the Beit HaMikdash. And not everybody can enter everywhere. If you're a Levi, you can go certain places. If you're a Kohen, you can go certain places. He said, but tell me, Rav Schwab, why aren't you a Kohen? Shah says, I was very puzzled by the question of the Chafetz Chaim. Of course, I'm not a Kohen because my father's not a Kohen. And why isn't your father a Kohen? I said, because his father wasn't a Kohen. But I sensed, Rav Schwab says, that the Chafetz Chaim wanted to tell me something. And Chafetz Chaim said, I'll tell you why. Because 3,000 years ago, at the incident of the Egel HaZahav, and the incident of the golden calf, your ancestors did not run when Moshe Rabbeinu called out. When Moshe Rabbeinu said, Mila Hashem Elai, who is for Hashem, come to me. My father, the Chafetz Chaim says, and all the other Levim ran to Moshe. But your father did not. The Rav Schwab would say the Chafetz Chaim's message is clear. People hear now the message clearly, Mila Hashem Elai. It is incumbent upon us to run to Hashem. Let us be those first responders, those heroes, and of Kedusha, of bringing people closer to Hashem, coming to Hashem ourselves. But you don't have to be a great person to do that. I saw this week a story that while I was reading it, I got very emotional. I'm going to abridge the story just for the sake of our timing. But the story goes that one day, a woman, a Rebbetzin Batya, gets a phone call. She gets a phone call from an elderly woman, and she says, I saw your name on Facebook, and I'm wondering, are you originally from Toronto? And Rebbetzin Batya, Shoichet Lisker, said, yes. She said, are you Rabbi David Shoichet's daughter? And the woman again said, yes. She said, I can't believe it. Do you remember there was a certain girl in the Lubavitch camp back in the year 1976, 1977? And she said what her daughter's name was. Rebbe Batya is thinking to herself and says, I honestly don't remember. But she didn't want to say that to this person, so she said, yes, vaguely I think I remember someone by that name. And this woman says, you don't know what you did to my daughter. Not only what you did to my daughter, what you did to all of us. She says, you influence us so deeply that today we are all religious because of you. My daughter, she says, married a wonderful man from Lakewood who runs a yeshiva, has 6 incredible children and 4 grandchildren to date. She says, for more than 40 years, I've tried to call you and thank you. You were the driving force behind Camp Lubavitch. You should know, at the time that my daughter went to your camp, I was a single mom to an 11-year-old daughter. I didn't know anything about Lubavitch. I didn't know anything about Judaism other than I was Jewish. I came to visit the Lubavitch main office as my daughter wanted to attend the camp. I met your father there, and I told him, I'm here to enroll my daughter into the camp. And he said, camp registration? That can wait. Next week's Pesach. Next week is Passover. We have to make sure you have all the essentials for Pesach. This woman says, when your father told me this, I broke down in tears. This was the first time that someone other than my mother took interest in me, took to the interest of what I needed in my life. I didn't need the food. But hearing how he cared, I immediately wanted to send my daughter and felt happy about sending her there. My daughter loved her months at the camp. She was excited to return the next summer. And she learned and experienced Judaism, the traditions, the stories, the songs, the challah baking, the relationships with the campers, with the staff. And one day, a few days after the camp ended, she came to me and told me she wanted to go to a religious day school. And I was very, very, very worried. I didn't know much about Judaism. Camp was one thing, but school. The next day at work, my boss, who was a widower and was a religious man, said, why was I so worried? And I told him. He said, no problem. He will come with me and my daughter to the interview at the school. When I got to the school, they quickly accepted my daughter, even though I wasn't ready to get their acceptance. I told them I needed time to consider. They said, there's no time. School is starting next week. And because your daughter will be attending a Jewish school, you have to start keeping some of the traditions at home. You have to keep the Shabbat. And I wasn't ready to do this. And the school said, you have to let us know by this week. I didn't know what to do, so I shut down my phone and I kept to myself until I decided that I wasn't going to do it. I went to work and I told my boss that yes, I was sending my daughter, and my daughter went to the school. My boss, who was a widower at that time, seeing my dedication, had decided in his mind, and I only found this out later, she says, that he wanted to marry me. And in the year 1980, we got married, and we had a son, and our son went to study in yeshiva in Israel. Today he's married and has 5 beautiful children. Do you understand, Batya? Do you understand how you changed all of our lives? You gave me a husband, a son, grandchildren. Rebbetzin Batya says, hearing all this, she was speechless. And she ended up calling this woman's daughter and to tell her that this is Batya Shochet from Toronto. And the daughter broke down and said, my mother has her story and I have mine. Do you know what changed everything? Do you know what made me go and become religious? It's that you wanted and took an interest in me. On the last day of camp, you saw how sad I was. And you knew I was going back to public school. And you told me that you don't think public school was for me. You said that Hashem loves me. And Hashem always watches over me. And Hashem will always protect me. You gave me a connection to Hashem. And that year I went back to public school. And I tried to stay away from bad influences. And I didn't want to get mixed up in things you warned me about. To stay away from drugs and other stuff that people were doing. And my friends were upset and they bullied me. But because of you, I was able to stay strong. And the following year, I made my mind up and I went to a Jewish day school. And because of you, throughout my whole life, throughout these 40 years, I stayed close to Hashem because of what you told me there. Rebbetzin Batya is thinking to herself and says, unbelievable. I just saw a young girl and I said a few words to her. I had no idea that those words that I said would change a whole family and bring so many children and grandchildren in this world that follow in the ways of the Torah of Hashem and do the mitzvot that we are commanded to do. Rabotai, the story I share, not just to share, but to know that every time we act, that every time we do something, it can make a huge impact on the people around us. And so with these lessons that we can take, I'm wishing everybody a Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat hi mekor beracha. Shabbat is the source of all blessing. May we continue to be blessed, and may we bless others in the zechut of the learning of Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom lekulam.